Easy, boy, we're here to help!
The dog bared his teeth the moment the ambulance doors opened. Not a wild snarl, not fear. It was a warning. Snow swirled in thick, heavy sheets, blown sideways by a bitter wind that sliced through coats and settled deep into the narrow alley. Red and blue lights bounced off brick walls slick with ice, turning the falling snow into flashes of color that vanished as quickly as they appeared. On the ground, half buried against the wall, lay a man who looked very much like he was already gone, and standing squarely over him, legs planted, body rigid, was a German shepherd who refused to move. "Don't step closer," Ellen Morris said quietly, one gloved hand lifting before her partner could take another step. Jake Turner froze mid-stride. "Ellen, we need to assess him." "I know," she replied, "but that dog isn't bluffing." The shepherd's breath came out in short white bursts. Snow clung to the fur along his back and muzzle, melting slowly from the heat of his body, only to freeze again. His ears were locked forward, eyes fixed on the two paramedics with a focus that sent a chill through Ellen, far colder than the wind. Between the dog's front legs lay the man. He was on his side, knees drawn slightly toward his chest, one arm twisted beneath him as if he'd fallen and never managed to get back up. His jacket was thin, worn at the elbows and stiff with frost. His beard and lashes were rimmed with ice. Ellen had seen this scene more times than she cared to count. Winter always collected its due. "Sir?" Jake called out, raising his voice over the wind. "Can you hear me?" The man did not move. The dog growled low in his throat, a steady vibration that echoed off the walls. He shifted forward half an inch, placing himself even more firmly between the responders and the body behind him. Ellen felt her stomach tighten. This wasn't chaos. This wasn't panic. This was intention. "All right," she said softly, more to the dog than anyone else. "All right, we're not rushing you." Jake glanced at her. "Ellen." "Give me a second," she murmured. She had been a paramedic for over 30 years. She had worked blizzards, pile-ups, cardiac arrests in living rooms, still warm from morning coffee. She had pronounced people dead in snowbanks, in parks, in alleys just like this one. And yet something about this moment pressed against her instincts, in a way she couldn't ignore. The dog lowered his head and nudged the man's shoulder with his nose. Once, twice. Then he lifted his head and let out a sharp bark that cut clean through the wind, not aimed at the paramedics, but upward into the empty sky, as if calling out to something that had not yet arrived. Ellen swallowed. "Control," Jake said into his radio, keeping his eyes on the dog. "We've got a possible deceased male with a highly protective German shepherd. Request animal control to assist." The shepherd's ears flicked at the sound of the radio, but he did not back away. Ellen crouched slowly, keeping her movements deliberate, visible. Her knees protested against the cold concrete, but she ignored it. She studied the man again. No visible rise of the chest. No shiver. No response. The snow was already beginning to soften his outline, as if the world were quietly trying to erase him. Jake leaned slightly to get a better look. "Ellen, I don't see respirations." "I know," she said. The dog's growl deepened, his body tense, ready. Ellen exhaled slowly, steadying herself. "But look at him." "At the man?" Jake asked. "No," she said. "At the dog." The shepherd's eyes never left the paramedics, but his body remained angled toward the man behind him. One paw rested protectively against the man's chest, not pressing, not pawing, just there, anchoring him. Ellen had seen grief before. She had seen dogs refuse to leave their owners after death. They howled, they paced, they collapsed onto bodies in despair. This dog was different. He wasn't mourning, he was guarding. A sudden gust of wind swept down the alley, and Ellen saw it then, something so small she almost missed it. A faint, barely perceptible movement beneath the man's neck. Her breath caught. "Jake," she said quietly without looking away, "do me a favor." "What?" "Tell me exactly how cold he feels." Jake hesitated, then leaned in just enough to brush the man's exposed wrist with the back of his glove. "Cold," he said. "Really cold. Like he's been out here all night." Ellen nodded slowly. The dog let out a low whine. Hypothermia, she thought. Severe hypothermia could slow everything down. Breathing, heart rate. even reflexes, to the point where life hid so deeply it was nearly invisible. The old saying surfaced in her mind, one drilled into her years ago. "You're not dead until you're warm and dead." Ellen shifted her weight forward just an inch. The dog snapped his teeth in the air, a clear boundary drawn. "All right," she said quickly. "That's far enough." "I hear you." She raised her hand slightly, palms open. "We're here to help him, but I won't touch him without you." The shepherd paused. His ears twitched, his head tilted ever so slightly. For the first time since they arrived, his growl softened, not gone but uncertain. Snow continued to fall, heavier now. Time was slipping, and somewhere beneath that still chest, Ellen was no longer sure the man had finished fighting. Animal control arrived 15 minutes later, and by then the snow had begun to fall in earnest. It came down thick and heavy, the kind that swallowed sound and blurred edges, turning the narrow alley into a tunnel of white and shadow. The flashing lights from the ambulance and patrol truck painted the scene in restless color. But beyond that glow, the city felt very far away. Officer Miguel Ramirez stepped out of his truck slowly, taking in the scene with a practiced eye. He'd worked animal control for 12 years, long enough to read dogs the way some people read faces. And this one made him stop. The German shepherd stood exactly where he had been, body squared, muscles tight but controlled. His chest rose and fell in measured breaths. His eyes tracked every movement Ramirez made, but there was no frenzy in them. "This isn't a stray," Ramirez said quietly, lowering his voice. "Not by a long shot." Jake nodded. "He won't let us near the man." Ramirez studied the dog more closely. "He's not attacking. He's warning." The shepherd nudged the man again, firmer this time, then looked back at Ellen as if expecting her to understand something she hadn't yet said out loud. Ellen's heart beat harder. "Sir!" Ramirez called softly, crouching a few steps away. "Easy, boy. Nobody's here to hurt him." The dog growled, low and steady, snow clinging to his whiskers. Ramirez glanced at Ellen. "If the man's deceased, we'll need to secure the animal." Ellen held his gaze. "And if he's not?" Ramirez hesitated. "Ma'am?" Ellen stood slowly, her joints aching in protest. She pointed toward the man's neck. "I saw movement, just a flicker. Could be hypothermia masking vitals." Jake stiffened. "You think he's alive?" "I think I'm not comfortable calling him otherwise," Ellen replied. The shepherd barked once, sharp, immediate, and placed both front paws against the man's chest now, as if reinforcing her words. Ramirez lowered the catchpole another inch. "That dog's telling you something." Snow settled on Ellen's eyelashes as she pulled off one glove. Ignoring the sting of cold against bare skin, she stepped closer again, inch by careful inch. The dog tensed but did not lunge. "That's it," she murmured. "I'm listening." She knelt beside him, close enough now to feel the heat radiating from his body. She extended her bare hand, not toward the man, but toward the dog. The shepherd froze, torn between instinct and trust. Ellen let her fingers brush the fur along his shoulder, thick, well-kept, despite the circumstances. "Good boy," she whispered. "You're doing your job." The growl faded into a low whine. Ellen shifted her attention back to the man. His face was ashen, lips tinged blue, skin waxy with cold. A younger medic might have stopped there. She didn't. She leaned close, watching, waiting. Nothing. Then there, a breath so shallow it barely stirred the snow resting on his beard. Ellen sucked in a breath of her own. Jake, he was at her side instantly. "What?" "He's breathing," she said. "Barely, but he's breathing." Jake's eyes widened. Jesus. The shepherd let out a sound halfway between a whine and a bark, tail flicking once against the snow. "All right," Jake said, adrenaline flooding his voice. "Hypothermia protocol, now." They moved fast but carefully. Ellen slipped a warming blanket from the kit and laid it gently over the man's torso, keeping her movements slow and predictable. The dog sniffed the blanket, then surprised everyone by lowering his head and resting it against the man's shoulder, as if lending his warmth to the effort. Ramirez exhaled slowly. "I've never seen that." "Neither have I," Ellen said. "But I'm grateful." They slid a backboard beneath the man with painstaking care. lifting just enough to avoid jostling his fragile body. The shepherd stayed pressed close, watching every motion, his eyes never leaving the man's face. "Can he ride with us?" Jake asked. Ellen looked at the dog, then at the man whose life now hung by threads too thin to see. "Yes," she said. "He's earned that." Inside the ambulance, heaters blasted hot air into the frozen space. The monitors flickered weakly to life, a slow, irregular heartbeat barely there, but unmistakably real. Jake adjusted the oxygen mask.
"Heart rate's in the 20s.
Ellen nodded. "That's hypothermia for you." The shepherd sat on the floor beside the stretcher, eyes locked on the man, body tense but calmer now, as if he finally believed help had arrived. They worked in silence, broken only by the hum of equipment and the rhythmic crunch of tires over snow. Ellen kept one hand on the man's wrist, feeling for that faint pulse, grounding herself in its stubborn persistence. "Hang on," she murmured, not sure whether she meant it for the man or the dog. At the hospital, staff rushed them into a trauma bay. Doctors moved quickly, efficiently, voices low but urgent. "Core temp is dangerously low," one said. "How long was he exposed?" "Unknown," Ellen replied. "But he's been out there a while." The shepherd tried to follow as they wheeled the stretcher away, nails scraping against the tile. A nurse stepped forward, unsure. "It's okay," Ellen said firmly. "He stays." The doctor glanced at the dog, then back at Ellen. Finally, he nodded. "Fine, but keep him clear." Hours passed. Thomas Reed, because that was the name they eventually found on a tattered ID in his pocket, lay motionless as machines breathed and warmed and worked for him. His body temperature crept upward by fractions of a degree. The shepherd did not move. He lay curled beside the bed, eyes open, alert, as if daring the world to take his person again. Ellen visited before her shift ended. She stood quietly in the doorway, watching the slow rise and fall of Thomas's chest. "He'd be gone without that dog," the nurse said softly. Ellen nodded. "Sometimes instinct sees what we can't." Outside, the snow kept falling, blanketing the city in silence. And somewhere beneath the machines and the blankets, a man who had nearly slipped away was still, fighting his way back, guided by a dog who never once believed he was lost. They learned Thomas Reed's story in pieces, not from him, at least not at first, but from the small, ordinary clues people leave behind without realizing they matter. A folded bus pass in his pocket, long expired. A calloused set of hands, marked by years of physical work. A dog who responded instantly to quiet commands, even when fear and exhaustion should have drowned them out. He wasn't always on the streets, the social worker said later. Reviewing the intake notes. Construction foreman, looks like. Decades on the job. Ellen wasn't surprised. She'd seen it before. One injury, one medical bill, one winter too many. Thomas had fallen from scaffolding 3 years earlier, shattering his ankle and tearing ligaments that never healed quite right. The pain lingered. The job disappeared. Then the apartment followed. His wife had already been gone, cancer quick and merciless. After that, there was no safety net left to catch him, except for the dog. Max had come from a shelter on the edge of the city. The staff remembered him well, an adult German shepherd, calm, intelligent, surrendered after his previous owner passed away. No aggression, no fear issues, just a dog who had already learned what loss felt like. Thomas hadn't planned on adopting that day. He'd gone in only to warm up, to get out of the rain. But Max had followed him from kennel to kennel, sitting down at his feet each time, brown eyes steady and patient. "You look like you could use a friend," the shelter worker had said. So did the dog. From that day on, they were rarely apart. Max learned Thomas's routines, his moods, his silences. He knew when pain slowed his steps and when pride kept him from asking for help. When Thomas lost his apartment, Max adjusted without complaint. When they slept under bridges or in doorways, Max stayed pressed close, a living shield against the cold and the dark. And on the night the storm rolled in, Max had known something was wrong before Thomas did. Thomas had complained of feeling dizzy, tired in a way that went beyond hunger or cold. Max had whined, paced, tugged at his sleeve, trying to lead him somewhere, anywhere with cover. Thomas had smiled and patted his head. "Just need to rest a minute, boy." That minute had stretched into something far more dangerous. Back in the hospital, the storm outside raged on. Snow piled against windows, turning the world into a blur of white. Inside, Thomas lay still, surrounded by warmth and light that felt foreign after so long in the cold. Max remained at his side. The nurses learned quickly not to question it. The dog never got in the way, never barked or growled. He simply watched, waited. On the third night, something changed. Ellen was home, halfway through a cup of tea, when her phone rang. She almost didn't answer, her knees ached. And the day had finally caught up with her, but she did. "It's Thomas Reed," the nurse said. "You might want to come in." Ellen didn't ask why. She grabbed her coat. When she reached the room, she knew immediately. Max was on his feet, tail wagging, not wildly, not frantically, but with a slow, hopeful rhythm. He whined softly, pacing the side of the bed. Thomas's fingers twitched. Then his eyes opened. They were unfocused at first, clouded with confusion and pain. His lips moved, soundless. Max barked once, joyous and sharp, and pressed his head against Thomas's chest. "There you go," Ellen murmured, standing back, letting the moment belong to them. "That's it. Stay with us." Thomas's gaze slowly found the dog. His brow furrowed, then recognition dawned. "Max," he rasped. The dog whined, tail thumping against the floor. Tears slipped from the corners of Thomas's eyes, tracking down into his beard. His hand lifted weakly, fingers trembling, and Max leaned into the touch like it was the most natural thing in the world. "I thought..." Thomas swallowed. "I thought I'd lost you." Max huffed softly, almost offended. Recovery was not quick. Thomas spent weeks in the hospital, then rehab. His body protested every step back towards strength. There were days when the pain was sharp and relentless, when the world felt too heavy and the future too uncertain. Max was there for all of it. He lay at Thomas's feet during physical therapy sessions, ears flicking at every sound of strain. When Thomas grew frustrated, Max rested his head against his knee, grounding him. When Thomas laughed, rare at first, then more often, Max wagged like he'd won a prize. The staff adored them. "He's the reason you're still here," one nurse said one afternoon, adjusting a blanket. Thomas nodded slowly. "I know," he thought often about that alley, about the snow, about how close he'd come to slipping away unnoticed. "They said you wouldn't let anyone touch me," he murmured to Max one night. Max blinked, unconcerned. "I guess you knew," Thomas said, before anyone else did. Winter eventually loosened its grip. Snow melted from sidewalks. The city moved on, unaware of how narrowly it had missed losing one more invisible soul. But Ellen never forgot that morning. She visited Thomas once more before he was discharged. He stood by the window now, steadier on his feet, Max sitting proudly beside him. "You listened," Thomas said to her. "You didn't give up." Ellen shook her head. "I followed the dog." Max's tail thumped once. Outside, the last patches of snow glistened in the sun. Inside, a man who had been declared almost gone was very much alive, because someone had stood between him and the world and refused to let go. Spring came quietly that year, as it often does after a hard winter. The snow didn't vanish all at once. It retreated in patches, along curbs first, then from rooftops, lingering stubbornly in the shadows where sunlight struggled to reach. People stepped around the last icy piles without a thought, already turning their attention to warmer days. Thomas Reed noticed every bit of it. From the bench outside the rehabilitation center, he watched the world wake up again. His ankles still ached when the air turned damp, and his steps were slower than they used to be. But they were steps all the same. Real ones, forward ones. Max sat at his side, leash loose between Thomas's fingers. The dog's coat gleamed now, clean and brushed. His posture relaxed but alert. He scanned the parking lot with quiet confidence, then glanced back at Thomas, checking in. "I'm all right," Thomas said softly, giving the leash a reassuring tug. Max wagged once and settled. The city had helped in small but meaningful ways. A caseworker found temporary housing, nothing fancy but warm and safe. A local church arranged food vouchers. A veterans group, after learning Thomas had spent 2 years in the army decades earlier, helped cover physical therapy costs he never could have afforded. And through it all, Max stayed close. On the day Thomas was officially discharged, Ellen Morris stopped by one last time. She didn't wear her uniform, just a simple coat. Her hair pulled back, but Thomas recognized her immediately. "Well," he said, pushing himself up carefully, "looks like you were right." Ellen smiled. "About what?" "About not being done yet." She glanced down at Max, who looked back at her calmly, tail swaying. "I had help." They stood there for a moment, the weight of the past winter hanging between them, heavy but no longer crushing. "I don't remember much," Thomas admitted. "Just cold, and then him." He nodded toward Max. "I remember his weight against me, his breathing. Like he was telling me to stay." Ellen nodded slowly. "Sometimes that's all it takes." Thomas swallowed. "If you hadn't waited." "But we did," Ellen said gently. "And you're here." A month later, Thomas found work again. Light duty at a hardware store, helping customers, organizing shelves. It wasn't what he'd once done, but it gave him purpose, routine, dignity. Max waited for him every evening at the door. Word spread about the dog who blocked paramedics in the snow. A local paper ran a short piece, no names, no photos, just a quiet story about instinct and patience, about a life nearly missed. Thomas didn't read it. He didn't need to. He knew what had happened in that alley. He knew how close the line had been, and who had stood on it, refusing to let him cross. On one late afternoon walk, they passed a narrow alley behind a row of shops. Snowmelt trickled along the pavement, sunlight barely touching the bricks. Thomas paused. Max looked up, ears pricked. "That's where it was," Thomas said, voice low. The alley looked smaller now, less frightening. Just another forgotten place in a busy city. Thomas crouched slowly and rested a hand on Max's chest, feeling the steady, living beat beneath his palm. "You didn't give up on me," he said. Max leaned into the touch, solid and warm. Life didn't change overnight. There were still hard days, still pain, still uncertainty. But there was also something new, a quiet understanding that life sometimes hangs by threads, too fine for machines to catch. Sometimes it takes patience, sometimes it takes trust, and sometimes it takes a dog who knows, long before anyone else, that a body lying still in the snow is not finished telling its story,